order. You will also need to place a serial number sticker on a new customer quick reference guide. Keep the faulty smart thermostat and the old work order separate from other materials. You will need to return the smart thermostat that failed back to the office for evaluation along with the appropriate paperwork. Be sure to also keep the old customer quick reference guide from other materials. If the battery function has been verified, continue with setup and testing. The battery in the smart thermostat retains the time and date during a power outage. However, if the smart thermostat is receiving power, temperature can still be controlled if the battery is not working. To enter the Energy Specialist setup functions, you need to press System and then press and hold the third and fifth button on the bottom row until the display changes. The Energy Specialist setup function screen should now look like this. To the left is the setup function number and to the right is the setting for that function. You can scroll through the setup function number and the settings for that function using the arrows to the right of each of those numbers. These setup functions and setting codes are listed in your training manual. Let's look at how to select calendar settings, set system and fan functions, select display settings, and set control and protection functions. The setup function 120 allows you to set the first two digits of the year. The default setting is 20. You can adjust the setting by pressing the up or down arrows next to the setting number. Press the up arrow adjacent to the function number to move on to the next desired setup function option. You will need to do this each time you have selected the appropriate setting for each setup function. Do not select Done until you have completed all settings for each of the setup functions. Doing so will save the settings and return to the main display. However, you can re-enter the Energy Specialist setup screen if necessary. Setup function 130 allows you to set the second two digits of the year. Press the arrows to the right of the setting option to select the desired last two digits of the year. Press the up arrow adjacent to the setup function number to move on to the next desired setup function option. Setup function 330 is the daylight savings settings. Selecting 2 as the setting for this function will automatically adjust the clock to account for daylight savings time. Setup function 640 is the clock format. Setting 12 shows the time in 12-hour time, for instance, 5:30 p.m. And setting 24 shows the time in 24-hour time, or 17:30 for our example. The settings for the system functions depends on what type of system or systems the customer has. Recommended and default settings for typical systems are listed in your student manual as a reference. Setup function 170 allows you to select the appropriate setting for the type of system the customer has. This is the main setup function that you will need to set for a majority of your appointments. However, use the reference guide in your student manual to help guide you through the other available setup functions and settings so that you are able to set up the smart thermostat correctly for the customer. Your student manual also shows the setup functions and settings for the fan, display, auto manual program, and control and protection program settings. In most cases, the default settings for these functions are appropriate. Again, use the reference in your student manual to ensure you correctly set up the smart thermostat for the customer. If you need to reset the smart thermostat to the factory settings for any reason, select Setup Function 710 and select Setting 1, then press Done. This will reset the smart thermostat to the factory setting, but retain the date and time settings you previously entered. Once you have finished selecting your setup functions and settings, you will need to perform a system test. This system test needs to be performed while you are in the Energy Specialist setup screen. While you're in the Energy Specialist setup screen, press the down arrow adjacent to the setup function number repeatedly until the word Test appears. You will need to perform the system test in a similar fashion as to what you performed during the pre-qualification process. During the summer season, you will need to check the heating system first, and during the winter season, when outdoor temperatures are 50 degrees or below, you will need to check the cooling system first. Let's take a look at the system test steps for each of these seasons, starting with the summer season procedures. You will need to test the heating system first during the summer season. Select Test 3 by pressing the arrow to the right of the word Test. The system status will default to 0, which has the heat and fan in the off setting. Use the arrow to the right of the 0 to select 1. This will turn the heat on. Go to the furnace, taking a flashlight and a 6-in-1 screwdriver to inspect that the unit is operating properly. If everything appears to be operating properly, replace and secure the door panel to the furnace. Return to the Smart Thermostat to continue with the system test. While still in Test 3, return the system status to 0. Now select Test 1 by using the arrows adjacent to the word Test. This will allow you to test the cooling system. The system status will default to 0, which has the compressor and fan in the off setting. Use the arrow to the right of the 0 to select 1. This will turn the compressor and fan on. Verify that the indoor high-speed fan is operating properly at the furnace. Go to the central air conditioner unit to confirm that the unit appears to be operating normally and is not making any unusual noises or vibrations, and then return to the thermostat. When you are testing the cooling system, you will want to avoid cycling the compressor quickly as the protection is temporarily bypassed during the test. While still in Test 1, return the system status to 0. Select Test 2 to test the fan system. Select 1 for the system status to turn on the fan. Wait a few moments to ensure that the fan turns on. Then select 0 for the system status to turn the fan off. Press Done to complete the summer system test. During the winter season, you will need to test the cooling system first. For this test, you will not turn the unit on. You will perform a visual inspection and ensure that the unit is receiving a signal from the thermostat. First, you will need to turn off power to the central air conditioner unit using appropriate lockout-tagout procedures. It is important to use appropriate lockout-tagout procedures to notify people that the power has been purposefully disconnected and that someone is working on the equipment. Return to the Smart Thermostat and select Test 1 by using the arrows adjacent to the word Test. This will allow you to test the cooling system. The system status will default to 0, which has the compressor and fan in the off setting. Use the arrow to the right of the 0 to select 1. This will send a signal to the compressor and fan to turn on. Verify that the indoor high-speed fan is operating properly at the furnace. Go to the air conditioner unit and use a non-contact voltage detector device along the control wire to confirm the signal to operate is being sent to the unit. Return to the Smart Thermostat and while still in Test 1, return the system status to 0. Then remove the lockout-tagout devices and restore power. It is very important that you first return to the thermostat to set the system status to 0. Not performing these steps in this order would cause the air conditioner to operate and may cause damage to the unit. You will need to perform the same system test procedures for the heating system and fan in the winter season as discussed for the summer season. When you have completed the system test, press Done. To complete the installation, you will need to access the Communications module and make one change in the Smart Thermostat setup. To access the communications module, select System, and then press and hold the 6th button from the left on the bottom row of buttons until the display changes to show Function 51. Press the up arrows until you reach Function 65. For a new smart thermostat, this should display the value of 1. Each utility will have a unique utility code that needs to be programmed into the smart thermostat. Ask your supervisor what the utility code is for the utilities area in which you're working, and write this information in the table in your student manual for later reference. Using the right arrow at the top of the screen, change the displayed value to match the value for the utility being installed. Once you have changed this setting, select Done to save your settings. When you return to the main Smart Thermostat screen, after approximately 5 minutes, the double dash display will be cleared, and the Smart Thermostat is now in operation. You have now completed installation of the Smart Thermostat and system setup and testing. Clean up your work area and put away any tools or materials, keeping the customer's old thermostat out but in the Smart Thermostat box. You are now ready to present the Smart Thermostat and its operations to the customer. You have completed Chapter 4. Please complete the chapter quiz located in your student manual. This training video will pause until you select Continue, and then we will review the quiz.